here on online here on Classic Country AM 410 and 50 again here on this Tuesday. It's time now to talk Virginia sports with Chris Graham of the Augusta Free Press. Chris, let's get right to college basketball. Duke was not to be invincible. Florida State ended that, I guess, a few days back. As a result, Duke slid to number 5 in the latest ESPN USA Today coaches poll. But obviously, when it comes to the ACC, Duke's still the team to beat.
Still the team to beat, but vulnerable. And last week when we talked, they did not seem that at all. Not only the loss to Florida State on the road, but then at home, struggling big time with Virginia. That was of the two, the more surprising to me. A Virginia team without Mike Scott. The news last week that Mike Scott will not be back this season, and Virginia playing shorthanded the rest of the way. And they had a 10-point lead in the first half, a 9-point lead midway through the second half, and Duke came back to win that game. But they looked very, very vulnerable, very, very invincible, I guess we could say, in a sense. They shot poorly from the floor. They poured it on in the last few minutes to make it look good in the final score. But this is a Duke team that, they're going to have off nights when they're not shooting the ball well, and they're going to lose some games. So the ACC more open, not only with Duke struggling, but Florida State winning. Florida State winning both of their games last week. A surprise with Georgia Tech knocking off North Carolina, not just knocking them off, but beating them by 20. Huge surprise there, considering Georgia Tech struggles earlier in the season. And then Maryland out of conference. They lose to Villanova, but they led most of the way. And that was after an impressive performance against Duke a week earlier. So the ACC suddenly goes from Duke and the 11 Dwarfs to quite a few teams now who could be in the mix. And I think that bodes well for ACC fans this year. Not everything is certain as we thought it was just a week ago.
Yeah, you look at these standings, and obviously Duke's a no-brainer for making the big dance coming up in March. But I mean, the other question is well, twofold. I guess if you look at the rest of the teams in the ACC, maybe except for Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, obviously, unless they would somehow magically win the ACC tournament, the conference tournament. But barring those two teams and barring Duke, all the rest of the teams have pretty respectable records. It's a matter if they're going to be good enough to get an at-large spot in the big dance.
Yeah, that's right. I would put NC State maybe in the mix down towards the bottom as well, but maybe they can work their way back in. But the rest of the teams all have good non-conference records, some good wins on their resume. And if even a Virginia, they might be the 9th or 10th place team right now. As far as that mix goes. But if they got hot in the ACC, they beat Minnesota non-conference. They beat Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. So they could be in that mix as well. But
you're talking about 9 teams, it looks like, as far as the overall records, with between 4 and 7 losses.
Yeah.
How many of those 9, and again, we're still obviously more than a month away, but I mean, how many of those 9 you think have a really good shot at making the postseason tournament?
Well, I like Florida State. They've got the marquee win so far over Duke. I like Maryland, the way they're playing right now. They don't have the marquee win necessarily, but they've impressed me with the way they played in the last couple of weeks. They seem like they're getting hot. Virginia Tech, that loss to North Carolina last week, that could have been a bad loss because Carolina goes out and loses then to Georgia Tech. But still, I like where Virginia Tech is right now.
Well, Virginia Tech's got some problems. I guess they haven't had the big non-conference wins and the competitiveness for those at-large spots in the ACC, as we just mentioned a few seconds ago. 7, 8, 9 teams battling. Obviously, Tech's going to have to get some big wins down the stretch.
They are, and that's why a win over Carolina, even though Carolina's down this year, a win at Carolina would have been a big win. But I still think, their RPI is pretty solid right now. Of course, we're way out worrying about RPIs, but their RPI is solid. They did play a much better non-conference schedule this year than last year, so their RPI set pretty decently. Even without the big marquee win, they have some nice close losses. They definitely up their level of play this year out of conference, and so they still have a lot of work to do in the ACC. But last year they won 10 in conference and didn't still get a bid. If they win 10 this year with their non-conference schedule, they do get in. So they've got to get there, and they've got some injuries to deal with. Some players lost for the season, that kind of thing. But if they can do what they got to do, they're good, I think, as far as that goes. Outside of that, there's a lot of teams with work to do. Miami, Virginia, in that mix. Some other teams as well. So, but I think I look at those 4. Maybe Carolina. They might be in that group with Virginia and Miami as far as teams who have a lot of work to do. Carolina, for all the pedigree, for all the recruiting successes that Roy Williams had following that national championship a couple years ago, this group's underperformed. So, that loss to Georgia Tech over the weekend really is a signal to Carolina that they've got a lot of work to do to get themselves back in that mix. They might be on the outside looking in right now. So I think there's maybe, Duke, of course, and then Virginia Tech, Maryland are set kind of teams as far as that goes, and Florida State as well. And then there's 4 or 5 teams that've got some work to do. So I think that's what the ACC season's all about. We're only 3 games in, and there's some teams who've got some work to do.
How do you size up upcoming games for UVA and Virginia Tech? Now, obviously, as we mentioned at this stage, especially for both those clubs, Virginia Tech especially, UVA with 7 losses, maybe even has more work to do. But I mean, obviously, the upcoming games for both the Hokies and the Cavaliers will be crucial.
Well, yeah, I know Virginia's next game is tomorrow night at Boston College, and on the road in the ACC, always tough. Well, at Boston College is tough. Now, Boston College has had an up and down season. They lost to Harvard and Yale this year, but they're still Boston College. They still have some dynamic players, a new coach, new regime, new approach to how they play basketball. So they're a program in transition. But again, they're still a quality program. And for a Virginia team now, they've played some elite teams in the ACC. They're 1-2 overall in the ACC. Their last 2 losses, though, to North Carolina and Duke, they beat Virginia Tech on the road. So this is a step, into the middle of the pack in the ACC. And we've seen this team play well. Even their 1-2 record, but they led Carolina most of the way before losing late. They led Duke for 30 minutes before losing in the last 10. As Duke made that patented Cameron Indoor Stadium run in that last 10 minutes to win that game. So Virginia really is in. They've played about as well as they can to go 1-2 in the ACC. But now let's see how they do against a different level of opposition in the ACC. They go on the road in a midweek game and an environment that's a tough place to play in Chestnut Hill, small gym. The fans are right on top of you. No TV, so it's kind of like you got to get up and play and get up and play early against that Boston College team. So that could be a tough test for this Cavs team. Can they win on the road in a tough environment? Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech on the other side, they're more established, I guess, in the fact they've lost some players. Virginia losing Mike Scott, that's been a relatively recent phenomenon. I know it's been off and on for weeks whether or not he'd come back. Virginia Tech's losses have really been season long. So, their rotation is set. They at least they didn't lose a key player like a Mike Scott. They still have Jeff Allen. They still have Malcolm Delaney, and so this Tech program I think is well positioned. I mean, I really do. I know that the early season losses and struggles notwithstanding, they were 4-4 after 8 games. I like where Tech is right now. They have a win over Florida State, who beat Duke. So, Virginia Tech is well positioned. It's just a matter of now both these teams really, hold and serve, going out and doing what they need to do the next couple of weeks before their next big games.
Hey, Chris, how about the Colonial, the season that JMU's put together, 15-3 thus far? Do they have to win their postseason conference tournament, though, or can they maybe get an at-large spot?
At-large spot might be tough for them because I don't know that they had the non-conference schedule that some other CAA teams in past years have had. Now, the CAA, of course, I mean, with George Mason going to the Final Four back in 2006, they've had some teams get at-large bids in recent years. So it's got a reputation as far as that goes. I haven't looked at JMU's RPI, but just my sense, I keep up with the Dukes pretty close. I don't know that they have right now that marquee non-conference win that would give them the ability to say, hey, we've earned our way in the tournament, whether we win our conference tournament or not. Now, that said, right now they're rolling through the CAA. If they can continue to dominate in the CAA the way they have, a great regular season in the CAA and then a slip up in the semifinals or finals of the CAA tournament, I think they would still be a contender for an at-large bid. But I also don't expect them to run through the CAA the way they have right now. That's a pretty tough conference. There's teams up and down that conference, 5, 6, 7 deep, that can win on any given night. But to say where they are right now, Matt Brady has done a great job with that program, to say the least. There were some whispers going into the season that, hey, Brady needs to start winning some games. He came in the first couple of seasons. He took over for Dean Keener. He inherited a good group of recruits and some solid young players. And, they had a couple of so-so seasons. I mean, good seasons, but so-so still for JMU fans' expectations. And so this season they needed to win. Well, they're doing it. 15-3. They're getting votes in the top 25 polls, and really impressing right now. 9 straight wins, and they're playing good basketball. And they're playing good defense. They're really putting up some points on offense. I like their inside game with Denzel Bowles. They got a great outside game. I mean, inside-outside game, really, if you want to say. Now let's see how they do against the toughies in the CAA. Let's see how they do against the VCUs and ODUs. And, but I think this team's potential is limitless. If they can avoid injuries, this team can have a good run in the CAA. And, to me, they look like the odds-on favorite to win the CAA and go into the NCAA tournament.
And over the Big South, the Liberty's lost only once. Coastal Carolina sits atop undefeated. VMI has lost 4 conference games at home. They have won 4 conference games on the road.
Yeah, isn't that odd as far as that goes? You know, this VMI team is literally up and down. They've had some good, you know, they had some good out of conference games. I mean, even though they lost to VCU and to West Virginia, you know, played them both tough. And then you know the up and down season in Big South play. You know, Big South play is like we've said over the years as we've talked about the Big South. To me, it's a really competitive conference. You look at Presbyterian, for example, beating Wake Forest on the road. I mean, that's Presbyterian is not necessarily one of your marquee programs, and you know, being an ACC team on the road. The Big South's quality basketball, but you know, that said, you still have to win the conference tournament to get in the NCAA tournament. So, a team like VMI that's had an up and down season, it's really about getting ready for March. You know, I like what VMI can do. I really like what Duger Balcom can do with his team. That's such a unique system to have to play against. And when they play it well, they make you play their game. And so, you know, they're always a dangerous team as we get into late February and early to mid-March as far as the way they can control a game. You know, if they make you play that up and down the court kind of pace of game, they can win in a one and done situation and surprise some teams. So, but that said, yeah, it's a tough conference this year with Liberty doing what they're doing and you know, I think up and down the Big South's pretty tough this year and any given night again, just like we've seen in recent years, any given night, you know, you can see some surprises in that conference. So I still like this VMI team. They had, you know, I like what Coach Balcom did there. I mean, as far as scheduling a tough non-conference schedule. I mean, I know they also played some cupcakes, but they you know tested themselves on the road a couple of times, and I think that will bode them well down the stretch.
Our guest here, Chris Graham of the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online.